Just taking some time to slow your body down. Checking in to see how you're breathing. And then inviting you to take a deep breath, filling your belly. Holding it. And then dropping your shoulders and blowing out slowly. Letting your body come back into a more relaxed state. And whenever you're ready, taking another deep breath in, breathing in through your nostrils, filling your belly. Holding it, then exhaling slowly. Letting your body come back into more of a rest position. And one more time, when you're ready, deep breath in. Hold it and blow out slowly. Just noticing how it feels to take this time out, to slow down, and to check in with yourself. Noticing what you're feeling at this moment. And also reflecting back on your day and on your week. And what have been the feelings that have been most prominent for you? Joyful feelings, sad feelings, angry feelings, anxious feelings. Whatever you become aware of, I invite you to know that there is no right or wrong to feelings. They simply are. So inviting you to accept them without judgment. Because when you accept them, you free up energy that you may have been using to hold them back. And you give yourself the possibility of being in charge of them. Once you're aware of them and accept them, you have lots of choices. Do you want to just notice it and let it go on by? Do you want to sit with it and explore what might be driving it, of expectations and beliefs? Do you want to express it in writing or to someone else? Lots of choices for how to be in charge of your feelings. So honoring that, and now inviting you to come back into an alert state as Tim and I discuss feelings.
Thank you, Sharon.
Mm-hmm.
I know the feelings that I came into touch with in reflecting in the past few days and the week is a feeling of overwhelm, of just the intensity of life and just the variety of things that have been happening in my life is going very quickly, as very demanding, as challenging, and this sense of overwhelm. And I appreciated your meditation because, in exploring the relationship between feelings and choices, it's to accept and to be aware of the feelings gives me the space then to decide what I need to do about it, what I would like to do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And this yearning for freedom and this yearning for space
Mm-hmm.
has been coming up over the last maybe day, where
Mm-hmm.
I've been feeling how much I need rest
Mm.
and giving myself permission to take breaks and to get more sleep without feeling guilty, without feeling like I'm, you know, letting anybody down, but really taking that time to rest has been
Mm-hmm.
important. So, um,
Wow.
yeah, so that's
Good.
what came up for me just now. So, um, and and even being in that meditative state with you guiding me, um, I feel a lot more. I feel slower and I feel more grounded. So I think we're off to a good start.
Good. Good.
Yeah. How are you feeling right now?
I'm about to sneeze. Sorry.
Okay.
Hold on. See if I can. I'm feeling sneezy. Okay. Well, hope it settles itself down. Um. Uh, I'm just feeling very grateful for our connection and grateful for your understanding of technology that we can reach people through podcast because there's no way I would know how to do it. And I enjoy the conversation. So,
Great. Great.
mhm.
Well, today we're going to focus on feelings, emotions as it relates to Virginia Satir's work and maybe also the way that we practice and work with people. And of course, there's always the overlap between the personal and the professional and how we use these ideas to help ourselves, which we've just touched upon by
Mhm.
sharing personally. But yeah, how in your experience as a clinician, um, what role do feelings have in the work that you do? How important are they? And how do they relate to the other aspects of consciousness that also exist? How do you use feelings? How do you relate to them? What can you say about that?
I work with gang interventionists in South Central Los Angeles. And it all started in 2011 when I read an article in the LA Times, huge article, in which they talked about this priest, Father Stan Bosch, who was having a very positive impact on with teens and gangs. And he's also a PhD psychologist. Uh, and so they said to him, well, what will you attribute your positive impact to? And he said, well, I ask these teens what they're feeling, and then I listen profoundly. And I went, wow. And I think that there is such utter healing in that.
Mm,
Because when you listen profoundly, I believe you're listening from your heart, your spirit, and your presence in a way that says, I am here for you. I'm not making any judgments. I'm seeing you. I'm working to understand you. And I accept you. All
mm,
of that in my mind comes from that. So when you say, what's your experience? with feelings, to me, listening for feelings and helping people hear my thoughts about what they're feeling and so they can begin to explore more is absolutely critical, because it's what opens the door for their own capacity to grow and heal. It's what gives them energy.
Mm. Okay, so let's sort of put that into a sequence. So let's talk about it, maybe a definition of feelings.
Okay.
Because the second thing that you're talking about is how you relate to them. And I
Mhm.
think the way that I think when we're in a positive way, in a healthy relationship with feelings, there's one way. And when we're in an unhealthy, maybe a destructive way with feelings is another way. And so there's a relationship that's
Yes.
modeled there. And
Yes.
you're talking about the relationship, that how you relate to someone else's feelings,
Yes.
this idea of listening profoundly. But maybe we could start off with, what is it about feelings that's so tricky, right? Because, there's a lot of literature about emotion regulation for people that have experienced trauma. The DBT focuses dialectical behavioral therapy, which is a very popular mode of therapy, focuses a lot, almost primarily on emotion regulation with children. It's a major topic. When we're talking about feelings, how do you define that?
I don't know. I'd like to tell you a story.
Okay.
Okay. Um, because it was a news story that came through this morning. It was very distressing to me, of a man who was sitting in a pizzeria in Paris yesterday. Did you read about this?
Mm-mm. No.
And got frustrated that he wasn't being waited on, pulled out a gun, and killed the waiter.
Oh my God.
Yes. And I think it is such an extremely important issue in our world
Mm-hmm.
that we have not taught people what to do when they feel a feeling, and what else. For example, we haven't taught them that there are other feelings that are underneath that feeling, you know. So, and other, other conclusions that that person is making that is driving the feeling, and how to back up from that, and how to see that there are other ways that you might look at this. So let's just go with this. Let's suppose that man says to himself, I'm not worthy. Somehow they don't like me. Yeah, I'm not worthy of them paying attention to me. And it personalizes the whole thing.
Mm.
And then he feels, first of all, frustrated, and then he starts to dwell on that, and he takes it to anger, and then he now has a pathway inside that says, if I'm angry, I need to act on it, and he has access to a firearm. So there's a sequence that I see happening in the world. We talked about it last week with all the mass shootings in the United States, and here this happened in a pizzeria in Paris this morning. It's just really serious that we have to help people understand how to tolerate frustration.
And I think one of the things about Virginia is she certainly focused a lot on feelings, but she didn't get stuck there.
Mm-mm.
That wasn't her only emphasis. And where you're going is you're immediate, like I'm asking, can you define feelings? But
Mm-hmm.
I think because you think in a way that's dynamic, you immediately go to perceptions, you immediately go to the sense of worthiness, what's the level of connection or lack of connection to the self, right? To a sense of value of self, which is where Virginia would go with people. And then that's the systemic nature of all these different parts of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
I think it is important to parcel out feelings, though, for this discussion artificially as separate, even though it's interacting with all these different things, whether it be family rules, whether it be expectations, because feelings fire first. Feelings are fast.
Yes.
And so to understand the relationship then that feelings have with these other parts of consciousness,
Mm-hmm.
which have to do with the cognitive element, which may have to do with underlying beliefs, which are maybe unconscious,
Mm-hmm.
and they're more implicit, um, to address, I think, feelings first, which is feelings are a complex of, I think, thinking, physical feelings. They fire quickly because they're part of the limbic system. They're part of the emotional centers of the brain.
Mm-hmm.
So they ignite and they stimulate the nervous system pre-verbally. So the patterns that we often get into, that we exist in relationships with, are there probably pre-verbally because we're in a family, before we can speak for a few years,
Mm-hmm.
2 or 3 years. So um, the idea that, you know, if we can talk about feelings initially and get organized around that, I think it's important because I think some people are resistant. For example, some people grow up with this idea that, like, boys don't cry,
Mm-hmm.
or you don't talk about your feelings.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of rules, or cultural or
Mm-hmm.
family wise, that
Mm-hmm.
block off the connection to feelings, right?
Mm-hmm.
So there may be people listening to our conversation saying, feelings, I don't want to go there, right? Because
Right.
there is that built-in resistance.
Yes. Sure.
I want to introduce it and sort of broaden the topic to say you really can't get away with not facing and addressing feelings
Mm-hmm.
if you're human. And I think the consequences to the news story that you just described, and the many news stories that we've been hearing about as relates to mastery. One of the definitions or descriptions that Virginia put out that I really like is, she said something along the lines that emotions are sort of like the life energy within us. It's the juice
Yeah.
within us,
Right.
and there's a fuel behind that. And
Mm-hmm.
in the word emotion is the word motion. Our Without our emotional experience, it's hard to feel motivated to do things, whether positively or negatively.
Mm-hmm.
Being aware and in touch with our emotions through the whole spectrum allows us to feel alive, and then to be properly motivated towards goals, and to
Mm-hmm.
properly address fears, to avoid things that might hurt us,
Mm-hmm.
and to have things that we're motivated towards, and have things that we're moving away from that aren't helpful for us, is to be fully motivated. And so
Mm-hmm.
I think to have access and to be able to experience all emotions is empowering.
Mm-hmm.
um, and then we can get into, how it can be most empowering, that we're using all of ourselves, our wisdom,
Mm-hmm.
our intelligence, our compassion, um, our awareness, all of that in relationship to emotions. But I see emotions as an important part of a network of resources within us
Yes.
that is so primary to, so fundamental to what it is to be
Yes.
human, to to not have a healthy understanding of feelings. One is to be disconnected from the life within us.
Mm-hmm.
It's like we're not connected to oxygen, or we're not connected to blood that flows within
Mm-hmm.
us. And when that flow isn't happening, then we can get stuck, and we can get into really rigid patterns that can be self-destructive.
Yes.
So,
Very. Yes.
um, so this, I mean, even the example that you talked about, the person probably felt what they felt before they had a thought about what they felt, right? But then the thought about it was probably something of blame, like, I'm being disrespected,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think what would be further away and out of the conscious awareness of this person is, I'm I'm not worthy, right? Or I'm feeling not worthy, which would be even further away,
Mm-hmm.
because that would demonstrate sort of a separation of, I can feel unworthy, but
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't mean that I am unworthy,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but the feeling and the aggravation, with the example at the grocery store or at the pizzeria, and the quick impulse of attack
Yes.
and of violence, um, shows that even though that person is a human being, they're not in that moment fully utilizing their resource of awareness,
Mm-hmm.
of making a choice. It's
Mm-hmm.
that feeling is so tied in the behavioral impulse of, I've got a gun and I
Yes.
can shoot, that it
Yes.
happens so quickly. Um,
Yes.
so that there's a slowing down part to emotions that I think then speaks to, well, as a child, how were your emotions related to? So, for example, if you got mad and threw your milk on the ground, did your parents just yell at you? Did they hit you? Was there some kind of like then traumatic experience that happened in relationship to that emotion coming out? They're like, you're not allowed to get mad, or you're not allowed to be sad, or whatever, whatever the response is, that then shuts that emotion down, and then that energy gets locked up.
Mm-hmm.
Right? So yeah, so I don't know what is that sort of way of describing feelings? Does that fit with how you think about it? And
Exactly. You're
yeah, is
so
there anything you?
beautiful. You're so beautiful at articulating it. And then I never put something together that you said, which was if you think about the word motion with any motion, and then you go to it motivates. And I love that because I do believe that when you can acknowledge the feelings, then there's energy for creativity, for productivity. It's not, you're
Yeah,
not, sometimes I think about it like, when we deny or ignore or suppress feelings, it's like putting a beach ball underwater. You hold and you hold and you hold. It takes a lot of energy.
mm-hmm,
And
mm-hmm,
eventually the ball is, probably going to slip out from your hand. In some way, you're going to lose that ball. And it may be that you pop off at somebody in a way that you didn't mean to because it's been building,
yeah,
or you get depressed because you've spent so much of your energy holding all this unexpressed stuff down.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
Um, when you ask about defining feelings, and I was kind of stuck about the definition, but some people say there are four primary categories, some say six. Four would be anger, fear, sadness, and joy. Six, where you would add shame and excitement. So, different experts have different categories. I just go with the primary four. Um,
mm-hmm.
but even when I'm working with people, even if you can articulate, I feel bad or I feel good, it can help. Even if it's just those two words in your vocabulary,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
it's
Yeah.
amazing.
Yeah, because the communication of it opens up uh, the connection
Mm-hmm.
between,
Mm-hmm.
right? To even ask,
Yeah.
and then to genuinely care for the response
Yes.
is not necessarily that I'm going to fix something or I'm going to change something in you. Um, and I had this experience with well, with many families where when a family's really doing good work, they give each other permission to feel whatever they feel without having to fix anything,
Mm-hmm.
right? And that really can't happen until the individual parent is doing that with themselves,
Mm.
that they're relating to their own emotions in a way
Mm-hmm.
of I'm just going to feel it, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to try to rush to get rid of it. I'm not going to shame myself for having this feeling, which
Mm-hmm.
now we're talking about the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Another way of talking about the way that you feel about um, your particular emotions is your attitude towards a feeling, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So I think within that, when we're now talking about the way that we relate to emotions, there's a few things that empower us to utilize emotions in a way that can motivate constructive, positive action. And that's firstly to take responsibility for them. That which I feel I've created. And I really love the way that Virginia worked with emotions because she would often she would often say these sentences that were like they sounded brilliant but were difficult to understand.
Yes.
She would say something like, what did your daughter do that you picked up then to create the emotion of happiness?
Yes.
Right?
Exactly. Exactly.
So so you're like, what did you just say?
Yep.
It sounds right. And so what I think she's saying is we all within our nervous system create the emotion, right?
Mhm.
So if there's a traumatic event that happens, if we are the victim and someone is perpetrating an action, verbal abuse, physical abuse, In that situation, I am in the stance, and justifiably so, I'm the victim. Okay, so I'm receiving this violence. It is still the case that I'm creating the emotional response to that. Now I'm living with the impact, right?
Yes.
It's not
Yes.
to say that I'm to blame for the traumatic event,
Right.
but my nervous system has to react in a way that now I'm stuck with, right?
Yeah.
That I then have to deal with. I can own the impact, but I don't own the behavior. So that creates a bound. It's a way to create a boundary, and so I can take responsibility. So if I'm living with a traumatic reoccurrence or flashbacks or something like that, that's what I'm working on.
Mm-hmm.
I'm never going to be able to change the past, the event of what happened, um, historically. But the idea that my emotions were created by my unconscious, whether I dissociated so I could survive, or I have a tremendous anxiety that I don't want to leave the house, it's to say, that emotion is mine. If I stay with, I feel these things because of that person,
Yes.
they did that to me, I'm going to be continually disempowered
Yes.
because I'm not yet owning my inner experience of what I created in reaction to that event. So the responsibility, just as a general like belief to adapt and say, yeah, what I makes sense. I can say that my emotions are created by me, and they're always in relationship to the events that are happening outside. I think the second part to that is I can only relate to my emotions in that way if I'm rooted in myself, if I'm connected to myself, if I have some notion that I am alive and I'm worthy so that I
Mm-hmm.
can look. Because I think many people confuse, and they don't mean to, that if I feel badly, that I am bad.
Yes.
And if I enmesh, if I create a blurred line between who I am and what I feel, then certain feelings become very dangerous, right?
Yes. Yes.
So, for
Yes.
example, Sharon, if you do something like, let's say, you forget our meeting and I'm mad at you, and you
Mm-hmm.
have a rule that if people are mad at me, that means I'm no good, and it means
Yes.
I'm not loved, and it
Yes.
means I'm going to be abandoned, then you never want to go there in terms of listening to my emotion about that.
Yes.
So then maybe you'll avoid, or you'll become irrelevant or change the topic or avoid me. And
Yep.
then we can never connect because I can never give you the feedback to say, this is what, this is the emotion that created me when you missed our meeting today at two
Mm-hmm.
o'clock. I felt really sad and I felt angry, and because you didn't meet my expectation that we would be able to connect, and I really wanted to connect with you.
Mm-hmm.
So without that communication, it's like then the intimacy can't happen. And I
Yes.
think that's where people in the families that I've worked with, and the individuals that I worked with, that's such a missing piece, because to go there means feeling really difficult and painful emotions.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but I think that's the that's the price of admission for like genuine connection, is to go there. And so that's like my wish, that as we talk about feelings, is that they're going to be scary for sure. And I don't want to give a kind of a message that, yeah, just you've talked about your feelings, they won't somehow be this big,
Mm-hmm.
and you won't
Mm-hmm.
feel shame about it.
Right.
It's still big and scary,
Yes.
and there's going to be lots of resistance to it. But hopefully what we're talking about maybe starts to present a map of, yes, that's always the initial step. It's like I have something difficult to say and I don't want to say it. But what's the larger goal here? You know, and maybe the larger goal is, this is an important relationship and I want to share it
Mm-hmm.
because I want a deeper connection with you. Yeah.
Yes.
And if
Yes.
if I'm if I'm looking at that longer term goal, then I have to surpass my impulse of avoidance, projection, denial
Yes.
of emotions, and
Yes.
get there. So,
Yes.
um, yeah.
That's I remember Brene Brown saying that the original definition of courage comes from the French word "coeur," and that which
Mhm.
means heart. And that real
Mhm.
courage, has to do with expressing what's in your heart. And one time I was working with a man who who had come into therapy. He was a semi-professional boxer, and one day he said to me, Sharon, I thought courage would be getting in the ring with Mike Tyson. No, courage is coming here and talking about my feelings.
Yeah,
Yeah.
beautiful. It's
Hmm.
so true. That's so true. Yeah, and with a lot of men that I've worked with, um, they they initially would say, you know, to feel these vulnerable emotions of sadness and worry and of loneliness, I used to define as weak.
Yes.
So I didn't go there because I don't want to be weak.
Right.
And then I would say something exactly to the effect of what you were just expressing, that it's in the expression of those vulnerable emotions that you are expressing great courage and great strength.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
and yeah, and I think that's counterintuitive,
Yes, it
but I think
is.
it's true.
Yes.
Yeah,
Leaning into that discomfort is not easy.
yeah,
It
yeah.
does take courage.
Yeah, there's something very powerful in being able to say, or very empowering to be able to say exactly what you're feeling and to be truthful with that.
Hmm.
And then to say, I trust that being honest will allow us to go where we need to go in our relationship,
Yes.
but to deny it and to not say it,
Hmm.
then you'll never know. You'll never know,
Right.
where you are in the relationship. You'll
Right.
never know the capacity of the other person in terms of what
Yes.
they would be willing to do.
Yes.
Um, and it, and I think it's best to give the relationship a chance and to lay everything out. And it does take a lot of courage. So it's like courage as a resource is like a meta resource that allows us to feel our feelings.
Yes.
And I think um, a value of truthfulness is also part of that as well. So there's
Hmm.
these universal human resources and values that make the transformation or the processing of emotions possible.
Hmm.
And I think that's one of the things I really appreciated about Virginia and with the different people that have trained me and in our conversations, where you can tap into these resources, move through your emotions, but really take care of them in a healthy, responsible way. And then you're moving through life and you're not getting
Hmm.
stuck.
Hmm.
Um, yeah.
It's such an important topic.
Hmm.
And I love the way you can articulate it. One of the things that I not only appreciated what you said about emotion that's acknowledged can lead to motivation, but you also said something else that was really powerful for me, and that was the way you articulated that if you have been hurt by someone else, you can you cannot change the event, but you have the power to change the impact on you. And that is such an important piece for
Hmm.
people. I
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
like that, Tim.
Yeah, I mean, in work with people that have experienced trauma, obviously the trauma is embedded in the body. The traumatic event is pre-verbal, so it transcends your ability to just think about things. It's
Hmm.
to tap into that and to say, how can I connect to my body? How can I connect to my whole self and come to a deeper understanding of my value and uh, my resources and my connection to life, so that I can venture out into the world again, connect with people, allow myself to have new experiences, to pursue goals that are important to me.
Hmm.
Um, and I think, with the things that I've been experiencing in just the last few months, I'm more and more accepting the tragedy of life, that
Hmm.
loss and death and trauma are part of life, and that acknowledging it and grieving it is important. Um, and I've been checking my own maybe underlying expectation that, if I'm living well, if I'm living by my values, then bad things won't happen to
Hmm.
me. Um, but that's just not the case. And
Hmm.
and I think to be buffered, and to be prepared mentally and emotionally and spiritually for that, to accept the yin and the yang of events that are going to
Yep.
happen,
Yep.
is to be prepared that when the events happen, the primary emotions of what we spoke of will erupt. And the eruptions of those, they could be volcanoes, they could be tsunamis. Internally,
Hmm.
I'm constantly building my ability to contain all of that, to reach out for support when that's needed,
Mm-hmm.
to express it honestly, to let people that I love know where I'm at a moment in
Mm-hmm.
time so they're not confused by my behavior or
Mm-hmm.
my expression if I'm off. Um, and that's it. That's like, that's the best that I think I could come up with of what to do
Mm-hmm.
at this point. But I appreciate that life is teaching me that I need to let go of some kind of a emotional perfection because the experience is going to be what it's going to be.
Yep.
It's then the coping and where I take it after that, that I have
Yeah.
some choices to make. So,
Yes.
yeah. Okay, Sharon, I really appreciate you as an important container of my experience from especially in the last little while in my life. So I want to thank you publicly for
Welcome.
that, the way that you've been supporting me and teaching me through your way of being how to relate to my inner experience in a loving, compassionate, patient way.
You're welcome.
Okay, so let's say bye to everyone and we'll see you next
Bye.
time.